In the history of World War II, few debates spark more arguments than this one. Tiger versus Sherman. Which tank was better? On paper, it's not even close. The German Tiger I was a monster. 68 tons of steel, armed with the legendary 88mm gun that could punch through nearly any Allied tank at ranges exceeding a mile. Its frontal armor was 100mm thick, sloped, and hardened to deflect most shells. When a Tiger appeared on the battlefield, Allied tank crews knew they were facing something their tanks weren't designed to fight. The American M4 Sherman, by comparison, looked almost quaint. 30 tons, a 75mm gun that struggled to penetrate heavy German armor. Frontal armor only 51mm thick at best. The Sherman couldn't penetrate a Tiger from the front at combat ranges. The Tiger could destroy a Sherman from virtually any angle at distances where the Sherman couldn't even fire back effectively. So the Tiger was clearly superior, right? Germany had the better tank, and that should be the end of the debate. Except it's not. Because war isn't fought on paper. It's fought in mud, across rivers, through bombed-out cities, over thousands of miles, with supply lines, maintenance crews, fuel shortages, and industrial capacity all playing roles that matter just as much as armor thickness and gun caliber. The real story of Tiger versus Sherman isn't about which tank would win in a one-on-one duel. It's about which tank was better at winning the war. And that's where the debate gets complicated. Let's start with what made the Tiger so fearsome. The Panzer VI Tiger I entered service in August 1942, and it immediately became a legend. Its 88mm KWK-36 gun was adapted from Germany's highly successful 88mm anti-aircraft gun, which had already proven devastatingly effective against tanks when used in ground combat during the North Africa campaign. The 88mm could penetrate 100mm of armor at 1,000 meters. That meant it could knock out virtually any Allied tank, Shermans, British Churchills, Soviet T-34s, from distances where those tanks couldn't effectively fight back. Allied tank commanders learned quickly that engaging a Tiger head-on was suicide. You couldn't penetrate its armor. It could destroy you effortlessly. The only option was to maneuver, flank, and hope to hit it from the side or rear where armor was thinner. The psychological impact was enormous. Allied tank crews developed something that historians later called Tiger fear, a visceral dread of encountering Tigers that affected morale and tactical decision-making. Reports came in of Allied crews abandoning perfectly functional tanks after seeing a Tiger in the distance, convinced that staying in their vehicle meant certain death. And the statistics seemed to support that fear. In Normandy during June and July 1944, German heavy tank battalions equipped with Tigers claimed hundreds of Allied tank kills while suffering relatively few losses themselves. One famous example: on June 13, 1944, a single Tiger commanded by SS Oberscharführer Michael Wittmann encountered a British column near Villers-Bocage and destroyed approximately 14 tanks and 15 other vehicles in about 15 minutes before withdrawing. Stories like that reinforced the Tiger's reputation as an unstoppable weapon. And in isolated engagements, in the right terrain, operated by experienced crews, the Tiger truly was dominant. But isolated engagements aren't how wars are won. The Sherman entered service in 1942, about the same time as the Tiger, but it was designed with completely different priorities. The Sherman wasn't trying to be the best tank on the battlefield. It was designed to be good enough armor, good enough gun, good enough mobility, while being reliable, easy to produce, and simple to maintain. And the Sherman succeeded brilliantly at those goals. American factories produced over 49,000 Shermans during the war. 50,000. They rolled off assembly lines in numbers that would have been unthinkable in any previous conflict. Ford's factory alone was producing 1 Sherman an hour at peak production. Germany, by comparison, built approximately 1,347 Tiger I tanks during the entire war. That's it. Fewer than 1,400 Tigers versus 49,000 Shermans. The production ratio was roughly 36 to 1. This wasn't because German industry was incompetent. It was because the Tiger was monumentally difficult and expensive to build. Each Tiger required approximately 300,000 man-hours to construct. The precision manufacturing, complex components, and expensive materials meant that building Tigers drained resources that could have been used to produce several simpler tanks. The Sherman, meanwhile, was designed for mass production from the start. Interchangeable parts, simple construction techniques, components that could be manufactured by factories that had been making cars and tractors months earlier. The Sherman wasn't elegant engineering, it was practical engineering, and that made all the difference.
Reliability was another critical factor. The Sherman's drivetrain was based on proven commercial designs. Its engine was a radial aircraft engine, the Wright 975, that was reliable, well understood, and easy to maintain. When something broke, repair crews could fix it quickly using common tools and readily available parts. The Tiger was a maintenance nightmare. Its complex suspension system, overlapping road wheels that gave it excellent cross-country performance, was prone to clogging with mud and freezing in winter conditions. Replacing an inner road wheel required removing multiple outer wheels first, a process that could take hours. The Tiger's Maybach HL230 engine was powerful but temperamental, requiring frequent maintenance and consuming fuel at prodigious rates. Fuel consumption was critical. A Tiger in combat conditions might average 1 mile per gallon. Its operational range was about 60 miles before needing refueling. The Sherman managed about 2.5 miles per gallon and could travel 120 miles on a full tank. That difference mattered enormously in mobile warfare, where supply lines stretched across hundreds of miles. And there's the strategic context. By 1944, when Tigers and Shermans were encountering each other regularly in France, Germany was already losing the war. Allied air superiority meant that German tank formations moving during daylight faced constant attack from fighter bombers. Supply lines were disrupted. Fuel was scarce. Replacement parts were delayed or unavailable. Meanwhile, American logistics kept Sherman units supplied, fueled, and maintained. If a Sherman was damaged, recovery vehicles towed it back to repair depots where crews fixed it or cannibalized it for parts to repair other Shermans. If a Sherman was destroyed, another one arrived as a replacement within days. The industrial and logistical machine behind the Sherman was just as important as the tank itself. This brings us to the core of the debate. In a direct engagement, Tiger beats Sherman, no question. The Tiger's superior firepower and armor gave it overwhelming advantages in tank versus tank combat. But wars aren't decided by individual duels. They're decided by industrial capacity, logistics, reliability, and the ability to put effective fighting vehicles in the field in numbers that matter.
The debate often focuses on individual combat encounters, and there are plenty of those to examine. But what actually happened when Tigers and Shermans met in battle was more complex than the simple narrative of German superiority suggests. Allied tank crews developed tactics specifically to counter Tigers. The standard approach was numerical superiority and flanking. If you encountered a Tiger, you didn't charge it head-on. You used terrain for cover, maneuvered multiple Shermans to different positions, and attacked from multiple angles simultaneously. The goal was to force the Tiger to choose which threat to engage, while other Shermans flanked and attacked from the sides or rear where armor was vulnerable. This wasn't elegant, and it wasn't without cost. The rule of thumb that emerged was brutal but practical. It took 5 Shermans to reliably kill 1 Tiger, and you'd probably lose 3 or 4 Shermans in the process. That sounds like a terrible exchange ratio, and for the individual crews it absolutely was. But from a strategic perspective, if you had 5 Shermans for every Tiger, and the Americans did many times over, those were acceptable losses. There's a grim mathematical logic to it. If destroying 1 Tiger costs you 3 Shermans, but you have 15 Shermans available and there's only 1 Tiger, you win. You lose tanks and crews, but you accomplish the mission. And because American production kept replacing losses while German production couldn't, the math worked in the Allies' favor over time. The terrain also mattered enormously.
In the Bocage country of Normandy, dense hedgerows forming natural barriers and limiting sightlines, tigers lost many of their advantages. Long-range firepower didn't help when you couldn't see beyond 100 meters. Heavy armor didn't matter as much when Shermans could ambush from close range. The tiger's weight and size made it difficult to maneuver through narrow lanes and soft soil. Shermans, being lighter and more mobile, adapted better to the terrain. In open terrain, the situation reversed. During fighting in the plains of northern France and Germany, tigers could engage at long range and use their firepower advantages effectively. But even there, Allied air superiority changed the equation. Tigers moving in daylight risk attack from P-47 Thunderbolts and Hawker Typhoons armed with rockets. Many tigers were destroyed by aircraft, not by other tanks. The Sherman also evolved during the war, and that's something often overlooked in the debate. The original M4 Sherman with a 75mm gun was indeed outmatched by tigers. But by 1944, upgraded versions appeared. The Sherman Firefly, a British modification mounting a 17-pounder gun, could penetrate tiger armor at combat ranges. The American M4A8 Easy 8 featured improved suspension, better armor, and a more powerful 76mm gun that significantly improved anti-armor performance. These upgraded Shermans weren't as good as Tigers in direct combat, but they narrowed the gap considerably. A Firefly could kill a Tiger from the front at reasonable combat distances. An Easy 8 had a fighting chance if it got the first shot. The Sherman adapted and improved faster than the Tiger did, largely because American production methods made modifications easier to implement across the entire fleet. There's also the question of what each tank was designed to do. The Tiger was conceived as a breakthrough weapon, a heavy tank meant to punch through enemy defensive lines and destroy enemy armor. It was specialized for high-intensity combat against hardened targets. The Sherman was designed as a general-purpose medium tank meant to support infantry, engage enemy positions, and exploit breakthroughs created by other forces. It was meant to fight a wide variety of targets, not just other tanks. Judged against their intended roles, both tanks succeeded. Tigers, when available, broke through defenses and destroyed enemy armor effectively. Shermans supported countless infantry operations, provided mobile firepower across diverse terrain, and proved adaptable to multiple roles. The Sherman served as a tank destroyer, infantry support vehicle, artillery platform, and even flamethrower carrier. Its versatility was a strength that doesn't show up in simple armor versus gun comparisons. The crew experience matters too. American tank crews generally received better training than late-war German crews. By 1944, Germany was rushing barely trained soldiers into combat to replace mounting casualties. American tankers, by contrast, typically received several months of training before entering combat. Experience mattered. A well-trained Sherman crew that understood tactics and worked together effectively was more dangerous than a novice Tiger crew, regardless of the hardware advantages. There's a famous quote attributed to German tank ace Otto Carius, who commanded Tigers on the Eastern Front. The Americans have a saying, "Quantity has a quality all its own." I learned the truth of that in Russia. Even the Germans who fought in Tigers acknowledged that numbers mattered more than individual superiority.
But let's address the other German heavy tank that enters this debate, the Tiger II, also called the King Tiger or Royal Tiger. It appeared in 1944 as an even more powerful evolution of the Tiger concept. The Tiger II mounted a longer 88mm gun with higher velocity, had thicker armor, 150mm on the frontal turret, and was even more heavily armored than the Tiger I. The Tiger II was virtually impervious to Sherman fire from the front. Its gun could destroy any Allied tank at extreme ranges. In terms of pure combat capability, it was probably the most powerful tank to see operational service during World War II. And it also perfectly illustrated everything wrong with German tank design philosophy. The Tiger II weighed 70 tons, so heavy that it broke bridges, got stuck in soft ground, and struggled to navigate terrain that lighter tanks crossed easily. Its fuel consumption was even worse than the Tiger I. It was mechanically unreliable, with transmissions that failed regularly under the strain of moving such massive weight. Production was limited to only 489 vehicles because building them was so complex and resource-intensive. Most Tiger IIs never saw combat. They broke down en route to the front, ran out of fuel, or were abandoned by crews when they couldn't be repaired or recovered. The ones that did fight were deadly when conditions favored them, but those conditions were rare. Allied air power, fuel shortages, and mechanical problems neutralized the Tiger II far more effectively than any Allied tank did. This gets to the heart of why the Tiger versus Sherman debate continues. If you're asking which tank you'd rather be in during a one-on-one fight, the answer is obviously the Tiger. Better gun, better armor, better protection. But if you're asking which tank was better at fulfilling its nation's strategic needs during World War II, the answer is clearly the Sherman. The Sherman won the war, not because it was superior tank for tank, but because it was superior in all the ways that actually mattered for winning. It was reliable enough to operate thousands of miles from factories. It was simple enough that crews could maintain it in field conditions. It was easy enough to produce that American industry could replace losses faster than combat destroyed them. And it was good enough to accomplish the missions required of it, even if that sometimes meant accepting casualties that more powerful tanks might have avoided. Germany's obsession with building superior individual weapons led to strategic failure. The resources spent building 1,347 Tigers could have produced approximately 5,000 Panzer IVs, a simpler, more reliable medium tank that would have been far more useful for Germany's actual strategic situation. The Tiger was a technological marvel, but it was also a resource trap that diverted critical materials and manufacturing capacity away from weapons Germany needed in larger numbers. There's a broader lesson here about military technology and strategy. The best weapon isn't always the one with the best specifications. The best weapon is the one that can be built in sufficient numbers, maintained in field conditions, and employed effectively by the troops using it. Excellence in isolation means nothing if you can't produce enough, supply enough, or maintain enough to make a difference. Post-war analysis by military historians generally concludes that the Sherman, despite its limitations, was one of the most successful tank designs of World War II, not because it was the most powerful, but because it was optimized for the realities of industrial warfare. It could be built quickly, shipped globally, maintained easily, and used effectively. Those qualities mattered more than armor thickness or gun caliber. Today, surviving Tigers are rare and precious. Museums treasure the few examples that remain. They're admired for their engineering, their presence, and what they represented about German tank design. Shermans are more common. Thousands survived the war, and many remain in museums or private collections around the world. They're appreciated not for being exceptional, but for being effective, for doing the job they were built to do, again and again across every theater of the war. The debate will never truly end because people are arguing about different things. Tank enthusiasts comparing specifications will always favor the Tiger because on paper it's clearly superior. Military historians examining strategic impact will favor the Sherman because it contributed more to winning the war. Both perspectives are valid, which is why the argument continues decades later. But here's what's not debatable. The war ended with Allied victory, and Shermans were there in overwhelming numbers to see it through. Tigers were fearsome weapons when they worked, when they had fuel, when they had ammunition, when they had trained crews, and when tactical conditions favored them. All those conditions had to align. The Sherman just had to show up, work, and keep working. And 49,000 times it did. Tiger versus Sherman. On the battlefield, Tiger wins the duel. In the war, Sherman wins the fight. And that's why people are still debating it today.